So thanks for saying yes, George Bonanno.
Oh, sure. My pleasure.
So you're a professor of clinical psychology at Columbia,
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Teachers College, Columbia University.
and you're also the author of two books that are super relevant to some of the conversations we've been having lately. We've already talked to you once for Richard Louis about grief. So we wanted to talk to you about resilience. What is resilience?
Well, resilience is when we go through something horrific, something really, we don't think we can deal with, we don't want to deal with, and we do end up coping with it fine.
And how rare is resilience?
Turns out most people are actually resilient. We don't know that, and there's a kind of a cultural zeitgeist, a cultural myth that people are carrying around trauma with them, hidden traumas, but none of that is actually accurate. Most people are resilient to even the worst things.
Are there qualities about us that make us resilient?
That's another myth, actually, because nothing works all the time. One of my favorite examples is the cheetah. And cheetahs have teeth and claws and eat meat, and they're the fastest mammals on Earth. But it's not a perfect adaptation to being a predator, because they can only hold that speed for about 30 seconds. In fact, cheetah lose most of the animals that they try to hunt. Humans are like that too. Those are things that we use that might be good basic behaviors. When we're faced with, the chips are down, we're faced with a serious adversity, it may not work. So what we need to do each time something happens is what I call the flexibility sequence. So first we have to, when something happens, when you're struggling, you take stock. What is happening to me? What do I need to do here? And this is something we've learned since children. We learn to pay attention to what's happening now. The classic, you're a parent, the famous phrase, use your inside voice here. And that means what you're saying is here, in this context, you behave differently than in another context. You have to pay attention to the context. When we focus on what's actually happening to us now, that anxiety or that feeling in that moment, that's what we need to deal with. And when we do that, we figure out, what can I do? And then we get the second step of this process, we ask ourselves, what are we actually able to do? We all have different skills and weaknesses and things. And then we try something. And then the third piece is we pay attention to the consequences. Did it work? Did this help me? If it didn't, try something else. And the more we do this, the more we get a sense of, I'll deal with it. Whatever happens, I'll just deal with it.
Would you say that it's like a recipe, like flexibility plus emotional regulation plus context sensitivity equals resilience?
No, I wouldn't say that.
I really wanted something simple, George.
Well, it is simple. Flexibility is what we do to become resilient. It doesn't equal resilience.
It doesn't require emotional regulation and context sensitivity, or are those three? How are those three?
The pieces
things?
are sensitivity to context, repertoire, like what you have to have something you do. The list can be infinite if it works for you. So we need another piece to that process, which I call the flexibility mindset. You need to kind of have a mindset for it. As we've studied it involves optimism, a sense of confidence in your coping abilities. It's kind of a conviction. I'll get through this. And that conviction really helps. When something bad happens, particularly if it's something we'd consider traumatic, we don't want to think about it, but we have to think about it. And our minds often make us think about it. That's why we have nightmares. That's why we have what we call intrusive thoughts. Something pops in your mind when you don't want it to. Your mind won't let you go. And that's partly, I think that's adaptive, because it tells us, figure this out.
Right, deal with this.
Deal with this. There's a phrase in the research we call threat appraisal and challenge appraisal. When we're feeling threatened, our bodies do certain things. It's generally passive. Our body's prepared to defend ourselves. But when we turn around and start focusing on the challenge, different bodily things happen that prepare us to fight, in a sense. And mentally, it also gets us focused on, what do I need to do to deal with this? And that's kind of an optimistic attitude, but optimism basically says, it'll be okay. I will find a way, even if I can't change this.
And where does a person get that sense? Like, where does a person acquire confidence in their coping abilities?
I think from simply coping. And we all do, and most people, I think, underestimate what they've been through. Most of us have been through some pretty bad things, and we move on from them.
Yeah, it's so important. I'm so glad we got to talk to you. Thank you so much for saying yes to this.
Sure.